Kevin Owens, host of the Overseas Famous podcast, here to personally invite you to subscribe to our official Patreon. Are you guys ready to take your podcast experience to the next level? Well, with our Patreon, you can do just that. And the best part, pricing starts at just $1. It's like a pack of gum. Less per month. By becoming a Patreon member, you'll unlock a world of amazing perks. We're talking merch giveaways, signed items by our guests, shout outs on the podcast, exclusive content, and so much more. Not only will you guys get to connect with me and the Overseas Famous community on a deeper level, but you'll also gain access to behind the scenes content and early episode releases. So don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Join our Patreon today and become part of the Overseas Famous family. Together, we will make podcast history. Thank you for your support and can't wait to see you on Patreon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Overseas Famous podcast. Now we switched a little flip on the script because we have NBA veteran, we have NBL Australian legend Chris Anstey on the program today. Chris and I played against each other when I was in the NBL. Tremendous competitor, someone that I always looked up to when I was playing there, and someone I really truly am excited to interview today. So Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, and thank you, and I love that you've gone with NBA veteran when I got through my rookie contract, and that was it. That's fantastic. I didn't do anything to get cut from my rookie contract, but no, I appreciate it.
No, and going into that, because you were the first NBL player drafted into the NBA. That was a big thing. You got drafted. Was that just almost, I want to think about like the pressure, because I know what it's like in Australia. I know how the fans are. They're so passionate. You represented an entire nation of people when you went over and came to the NBA playing with the Mavericks. Was that something that ever stressed you out? Was that something that you looked at as wow, I have a lot of pressure on me? Or was it just, I'm here to play, that you weren't worried about all of that extracurricular?
I just getting to the NBA, I think I got there ahead of time. I was new to the game. I only started playing at 17, and I was very fortunate to play for a coach over here named Brian Gorgian, and none of your listeners will probably know who he is, but he instilled a work ethic into me that allowed me into that position. And it's, the first part of being the first NBL player drafted was special, because I think doing anything for the first time and showing that it's possible. And I'm a big, why not guy? Why not be the first of this? Why not try something different? Why not, shoot the three when you're 7 foot tall? That kind of thing. So that was exciting, but the reality hit really, really quickly, because I wasn't very good in the NBL my first 2 years. And like I said, I got to a stage where I improved enough to get over there, but I went straight back to not being very good again. And when you're a first round draft pick on a team that's struggling, as the Dallas Mavericks were, I think as much as the club says that you're a long-term project and it'll take a little bit of time to invest, the fans still expect something straight away. There was pressure. I'm glad there wasn't social media or as much coverage back into Australia back then, because even back in Australia, there were still a lot of people who didn't think I was very good. But I was really proud of, I had a game where I had 26 points against the Boston Celtics. I had a couple of 20-point games, and, I won't go into it now, but we beat the Chicago Bulls on their way to the 6th championship. So there were some incredible memories just from the rookie year. And then year 2, I got to play on a team with Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki before they became who we know them to be now. So was there pressure? Yeah, right at the start. But I'd tell anyone when I speak back at home these days, at the minute I stopped caring what other people thought, I was able just to relax and be me and improve. And, the only person or the only people that I cared about their opinions were sitting in the locker room or back home in Australia, and the ones who helped me get to the NBA.
You kind of talked about that Chicago Bulls game. You got that shout out in The Last Dance, and where you kind of went and
Can I say I was really proud of my 17-year basketball career, and all anybody told me was I saw you for about a second and a half in the last dance. I thought, geez, the generations have changed. That's what I am now. I'm a 2 second in the last dance, and they believe me I was there now.
It's so funny because I did the same. I'm sitting there watching it with my daughter. I'm like, it's Chris. I was like, Daddy played against him. And that was my daughter. That was like my little 2 seconds. She's like, you played against him? I was like, yeah.
My kids too. It's okay.
But you had, those moments that you kind of had where you played a very aggressive style and you didn't back down from people. And that's what it was one of those things when we played Melbourne. That was always something that everyone was kind of telling me. They're like, that first game, I'm coming in. They're like, Chris, he's gonna go to work. He's gonna step out. He's gonna shoot the three, but he's also gonna take you down and he's gonna try to, beat you up. And I was like, I like that because that was it was something when I remember playing against you, and I was a very like cerebral player. I just remember watching how you moved, and I was like, man, like I love how he plays. And it was that first time where I looked and I was like, man, he's just. The way you moved, the way you were so cerebral, and you used all your moves, but you weren't afraid to back down. And like with the Rodman thing, you go and you got your elbow, and we're teaching people all the time, like that's how you rebound. was when that happened. Was that something that went through your mind? You're like, oh shit, there's Dennis Rodman, or were you just like, yeah, like this is I belong. What are you gonna do?
So to go back, I always consider myself, and I still do, really naive. And, there's a way that the vast majority of people teach things and do things, and I don't like it. I like to think, why not? And honestly, there was a day I used to play for the Melbourne Tigers in my first stint there, and they ran a system, and you probably remember the shuffle even from your time in Australia, but the 5-man would step out to the top of the key. The defensive 5-man would sit in the middle of the lane and just hit all of the cutters on their way through. And I used to catch it at the top and was instructed every single time to swing it and screen away. And I thought, imagine if this player could shoot. I mean, it's wide open every single time. I was that dumb and naive. So quite literally, I went out to the backcourts that day and shot hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of threes. And I did the same thing the next day. And I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. And eventually I shot one at practice, got into trouble from Lindsay Gaze because it missed, and probably never did it again in my first go at the Tigers. But I was always a little bit of that where, Don Nelson taught me later and probably verbalized what I was teaching myself, is that most coaches will tell you to go to your strengths, whereas Don Nelson always told me, go to your defender's weaknesses. So he was one of the first to look. Point guards don't spend a lot of time defending the post, so let's do that. Bigs don't spend a lot of time sliding their feet on the perimeter or closing out with a hand, so let's do that. And I always found that to be effective. So to your point, that if I thought I had an advantage against you inside, I'd try to do that. If I thought you were too good, too big, too strong, I'd take you up to the three and try to beat you that way. And I didn't want to be one-dimensional. So when I got to that Chicago Bulls game, and I learned so much from Dennis Rodman I played nearly 30 minutes that game. I learned so much in that 30 minutes about how effective you can be by playing two passes ahead, not one pass ahead of the play, but two passes ahead of the play. The way he would start wedging me under the basket 2 passes before he knew they were going to shoot it, and the way he'd maneuver. I won't bore you with it all, but so on that one particular play, and it was in overtime, he might have had 20-odd rebounds for the game. I might have had 3, and Steve Kerr missed a 3. And I was able to get a hand and use my length, and I tapped it around and got it. And all I knew to do in the most important moment, I love my quotes. I vomit them out all the time, but, under pressure, you revert to habit. You don't rise to the occasion. And so my habit was exactly that. It was just old school, get your elbows up. And I felt Rodman just sort of hit me in the ribs. And to your point about being aggressive, I was always the guy where I can do whatever I want. You don't start a fight on a court. You can be as annoying as you want. They're not going to punch you or start a fight. So everyone who runs up and acts like they're going to start a fight. They're not going to do anything. You're playing in front of 20,000 people in a TV audience. And so it was a bit of that, and I stopped right before I got there and just laughed at him. And that was the smart ass in me. That was always the fun I had. And I must admit, Cedric Sabalis jumped in, Mike Finley jumped in, and then the referee blew his whistle and called a tech foul. And I thought, oh, shit, I've just blown this. We're up against the Bulls in overtime. I didn't touch him, but they've blown a tech foul. And actually gave both of us one, and we got the ball. So that was a massive relief. And what the video, no one watches this part. I went and turned the ball over the next possession and they scored. And I thought, oh, no. They're going to look back at that and think we were going to beat the Bulls and because of you. So I'm glad that I played well after that. But I don't know, it was just one of those moments that was an incredible reward for the work that I'd done to put myself on the court.
You have a very it's like a trademark. I know everyone I talk to, you've maintained good relationships with a lot of your former teammates and even opponents. I mean, we talk about Dirk, and you still are, have a good relationship with him. And his rookie year, you were there. What is it about you, personality-wise? I mean, I know the podcast with Mark. It's like you have these great relationships with people, but you were really tough on the court. But you were able to, off the court, establish this person who just people are drawn to. What is it about that just people are just drawn to you and want to continue hanging out with you? What would you say about your personality?
Yeah,
it's so special.
I don't think it's that at all. It was funny because when I played, I honestly was so invested in my teammates, and I didn't have friends around the league. And I think a lot of my basketball friendships, probably surprisingly, I've gotten close with people since we retired, when we can go and sit down and have a beer and share stories and talk about the battle and, talk about what we're each able to do, a little bit like this, and share a little bit. But at the time, I couldn't be friends with you and compete with you. I wasn't. But I suppose I wasn't a dick. I'd like to think I wasn't. I didn't have an ego, although others would tell you at times I did. I don't know. There are plenty out there who don't like me and they think other things of me, but again, I don't care. It gets back to that. I actually don't care what I think, and actually, I don't care if we didn't get along. Some of the best conversations I've had since I retired have been ones with guys where they're like, "Hang on, but you hated each other." And you mentioned Mark Worthington, and I do a podcast with him. We hated each other. I'm 10 years older than him, nearly. We hated each other, but I think a lot of my friendships have come from, I respected the hell out of so many players because I was aspiring to compete against them and then in turn take from them what they were working for. And perhaps as I improved, they might have respected what I was doing as well. And I think that led to conversations after we retired. And perhaps it's that, I don't know. I've never considered myself to have a bunch of basketball friends because I never had any growing up because I played tennis, and I always felt a little bit like the odd man out trying to fit in.
You go in, you're with the Mavericks. Dirk's there. Was that something? Is that like a player that you look at? You've talked in your book and everything. We'll get to your book about like your experience against like seeing Michael Jordan up close. But when you play a player like Dirk and you're up close with him in practice every day, is that someone you were just like immediately like, wow, that's a pretty special guy? Because he wasn't highly touted, and then just kind of really became something.
The word for him was effortless, and but only in his jump shot. And people will always look. People forget quite easily that Dirk struggled a lot in his first 2 years. So did Steve Nash when he came to Dallas, and Steve even more so, where I'll never forget a game where the Dallas fans were so down on the trade to bring Steve Nash to town. And it was the shortened lockout season. We're about a month in, and every time Steve brought the ball down the floor, clearly as our point guard, our home fans booed him. 15,000 home fans booed. Now, think how crazy that sounds right now that Steve Nash got booed when he got to Dallas because they didn't think he was good enough to be on a poor Dallas Mavericks team. It sounds inconceivable. And Dirk was the same. A lot of people thought, well, most people thought back then that anyone who wasn't American was soft. So I battled that. Dirk battled that. Plenty of others did the same. It's taken a long time for the American basketball public, I think, to respect the fact that non-American players are not soft. There's a different level of skill and a different way we see the game. But Dirk, I remember calling my coach and saying, you want to see this kid, and this is after a few months, but I honestly, a hand on heart, I said he'll be the best European player to ever play in the game. And Georgian just started laughing. He said, "You've lost your mind. I know he's your teammate." I said, "Mate, you don't understand how great his touch is and how hard he works." And George called me a number of years later. He said, "You might be right, you know." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You remember calling." So it was a privilege to be around them. We all lived in the same apartment building. It was disappointing to not have more time with them, but it's also great to remain connected.
You talked a little bit about how European players and Australian players and foreign players in general were perceived by the NBA fans. Now, when you go back and you're playing in the NBL, when I got there around that 2006, 2007, you guys were a powerhouse. You were a superstar, probably the best player in the league. And what was your perception of American players coming over? Did you have a perception? Were you looking at different American players and being like, "Oh, he's not shit. Like I can work him," or was it like, "Okay, this is what the typical American player is going to do"? Like,
it was. You know what? Since my time in the States, I'd been home for a couple of years, and I'd been in Russia for 3 years. I'd played as an import in a pretty tough league for 3 years, and you get to understand their psyche a little bit. And what I knew that there was a pressure on imports to come in to perform, and imports are widely expected to be one of, if not the best players on your team. And so I wanted to make sure I went at them, just to let them know that this league might be a little bit tougher than what they expected it to be, because I'm sure to this day that there were still imports who came to the NBL in Australia who thought, and haven't heard too much about it. I reckon it's a B grade league, and I knew that we were a pretty good team, and I wanted to make sure that any import who came in the league realised what they were walking into, and there was a sense of responsibility around that. The other thing was, and it's a little bit of a technical one, we always felt that imports were susceptible to backdoor cuts because you very rarely guarded them in college, and a lot of teams stand around, get the ball into your best player's hands, break you down one-on-one, whereas we like to move the imports around without the ball, the little sneaky backdoor cuts that we run, and just really annoy them, because they used to, back then there was a perception from a lot of the imports that was almost sneaky or a cheating way to play basketball. We can move the ball and we're going to frustrate the living hell out of you defensively. We're going to come and clog up the lane when you got the ball and you're sitting on it yo-yoing. So there was a bit of that. But look, all in all, to this day, I still think you need 2 great imports to be really competitive here in the league. And you bring your imports in to supplement the local talent you have. But we've had so many great ones over there. You could list them off, but certainly learned plenty from them.
Yeah, it's you talked a little bit about that, just what you expect and what those imports kind of do, and it's a very smart strategy to kind of use their aggressiveness against you, because like playing in Russia, playing in Dallas, you have this excess pressure on you, and you're trying to make sure that you're doing everything 1,000 miles an hour. And sometimes I found myself, like, I had Fernie and Alan Black saying, like, calm down, like, you're playing out of control, you're playing too aggressive, it's like you're getting in foul trouble, because I was just trying so hard to make it and not screw up. And that's what, it's a smart strategy to be like, listen, these guys are going to come out here fired up, backdoor them, take their aggressiveness and take it away, and just make them, do those little things that they're going to get. And when you have imports who are able to do those little things, and I think that's what I kind of settled in. We started working me a little more off the ball, and we had, Darnell me, and we had Cat was playing out of his mind at that time. So it was like less pressure. I was able to do those little things and just play my game. But man, it's tough coming into those leagues when you really have that pressure to perform as an import.
And I did the same thing, but really in a geeky type of way. I always loved maths and I was good at it. And even when I was playing my absolute best basketball in Russia and back at the Tigers, one of my friends actually took a stopwatch to a game and timed how long the ball was in my hands for in a game where I had, I think, 35. And it was 3.5 minutes. And that just really hit home, where we spend so much time drilling young players on what to do when the ball's in their hands and never discussing how to play without the ball. And that was the year I won MVP of the league, and the ball was in my hands less than 10% of the game, way less. And that was as good as I could play. That was the most I was ever going to have the ball in my hands in a game. And that's just something I always invested in. How do I gain an advantage when my teammates are doing what they do?
I'm going to, when we actually roll this out live, I'm going to add an applause to that statement, because that was absolutely incredible. We do so much drilling. What do you do with the ball in your hands? And no one really talks about how you can, achieve success with the ball out of your hands. MVP of the league, and you have it less than 10% of the time. That's an incredible
there's that game that I love that Klay Thompson had 41, 51 and took 2 dribbles for the game. Yeah, it's incredible. That's the mindset that I think not enough players work on, the speed in which they get to their spots, the level, how hard you work your immediate defender if you're a big, you're stepping in on them in the key while they're helping on the split line, all those kinds of things. Nobody does anymore. There are so many easy, but the first thing I ever learned, I know we're probably off topic, but one of the first things Brian Goorjian ever said to me, and it remained with me my entire career. He said, sprint your lanes and go to the offensive boards. He said, my goal, my very first year I played for Brian Goorjian, was get 1 transition basket a quarter and 1 offensive rebound a quarter. If I did that and only put half of the offensive rebounds back, I was 12 points and 4 rebounds a game. I hadn't touched the ball. Wow. It was as simple as that. And so that was what I always, even at the end, when I wasn't going good, I ran the lanes or I went to the board.
That is something, and a lot of people don't talk about, like, the psychology of what we're going through. And that was something I always thought. I was like, okay, in order to get 20 points, I need to score this many. And I thought the same thing. Get an offensive rebound. You need to run the floor and get a few. And you would think, like, quarter by quarter, how am I going to go? And then you get to the halftime and you're like, shit, I have 4 points. I need to pick this up. And it starts going. But it is something that everyone talks about, like, team and stuff. But when you're over there and like, A, your team needs you to score, and B, your team needs you to score for other, you have a lot of pressure on you. So when you had that opportunity, that was always what I thought. So it's incredible to hear that I'm not alone sitting there going, like, okay, let's calculate this, because I thought the same exact way.
Even when I've coached now for a long time, I always tell my players, I've never got a problem with the skill error. I've got a problem with effort errors and decision-making errors if they're repeated. But I always told them that made shots are just a bonus. You can still play great and not make a shot. Shooting the ball well is just a bonus. It's not what you evaluate your game on. It's a pretty simple game when you think about it like that.
You were part of, like, this really good surgence of the Boomers, the Australian national team. You guys really started coming on the scene and really exploding out, because, the dream team, and we all hear about the dream team. And as that dream team ended, Australian basketball started picking up, and you were a big part of that. Was that something that you look at with tremendous admiration, because you guys really put Australian, and now everyone knows, look at how many NBA players are Australian. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, I'm proud of as I mentioned earlier, getting to the NBA the way I did, and that, our Next Stars program here is globally recognized now, where the NBL is a recognized pathway. I don't think I was a huge part of the Boomers. I came into the Boomers program at the end of the Andrew Gaze, Mark Bradkey, Luke Longley, Shane Heal era, and then was the start of one that struggled and actually missed. I feel like the best Olympic Games I would have been Athens. I was really in my sweet spot. I was playing well and I was injured. And I missed the Athens Olympic Games. And, that was when Bogut was starting. And, but I got the start of Patty Mills and Joe Ingles in Beijing. So I don't feel like I was a part of it, a huge part of it. Clearly everyone who plays is an important part of it. But one thing that always bothered me, again, I'm naive, and you mentioned the dream team. There were so many games we played in the biggest moment in the Sydney Olympics that it was clearly a highlight of my basketball life to represent my country on home soil. And we had turned around a poor start to the tournament to make our way into the semi-finals, and all tournament long we had this internal, we wore MOB we had MOB printed up in our t-shirts, and our mantra internally that we told no one until the end, that we were going to tell no one until the end of the tournament, was medal or bust. And I thought that was the first time that I think Australian men's basketball ever truly believed that we could win a medal. Not this, we wanted to say it. And that was me as well. In the years leading up, we'd play teams, and I always had the sense that if we competed and got close, we were happy, because that was the sort of message that came from the coach. They're a powerhouse, and that, God, we're beaten before we start. And so finally at Sydney, we had Longley back and we had Bradkey, and we made it to the Final Four, and we played two horrible games. We got blown out by France and by Lithuania, I believe. And our coach got to the press conference after the tournament, and they finally said, okay, the tournament's done, MOB. And he said, men's Olympic basketball. And I thought, what a cop-out. I mean, stand by it. That was really, really disappointing to someone who felt that finishing fourth at the Olympics Games was a bust. I didn't buy into that it's equal best we've ever done. It was disappointing, because when you make a semi-finals in tournament play, only one team doesn't win a medal, and that was us again. So that bothered me for a long time. And, it's taken the crew, Patty Mills, Joe Ingles, Aaron Baines, Matthew Dellavedova, to, I think, assist in putting steps in place where players who walk in have the type of standards that are required to beat anyone in the world on any given day. But at the same time, I've got a World Cup coming up, and we finally won our first Olympic medal. I cried. You want to see my 8-year-old son, at the time, he was my 6-year-old son, sitting on my knee. I kept him up all night. The phones were going crazy from old, and as excited as we were, geez, I was almost a little bit jealous as well, that was something we fought so hard for and believed in and couldn't do it. So as happy as we were for the boys, we wished we'd been able to deliver that earlier. But having said that, it's just not a given anymore that we win another one. Look at the Canadian team that's about to hit the floor. Clearly the Americans, the South Americans, the Europeans, the rest of the world's getting better at the same rate that we are. And as an island nation, sometimes we forget that. So the task's going to be monumental moving forward.
Now, you wrote a book, Tall Tales. It's incredible, because I always feel like as athletes, everyone's asking us shit all the time. They're like, what was this? What was this? I mean, we're doing a podcast telling stories. And it's so fascinating to me that all of these stories, just like getting into the mind of an athlete. What was it that made you want to write this book?
Lockdown. No, it was COVID. I wanted to be productive during COVID, and I wanted to achieve something. I didn't want to feel sorry for myself. And I was sitting around. I wrote one story. It's funny, and I wrote it about pathways. Everybody talks about there being a pathway to success. I don't buy into that at all. I believe there are habits and behaviors that lead you to success, and you can jump on any pathway you want if they're right. And in the book, I say that my doubles partner growing up played tennis until he was 16 and played more games of Australian rules professional football than everyone in history bar 4. And I didn't touch a basketball until I was 17 and got to the NBA and represented the country. There's no pathway that describes that. But we both had really good habits and behaviors that allowed us to do that. So I started with that. And it was funny that I wrote this story. I thought I'll put it on Facebook. I just felt that there needed to be a little bit of positivity. There was so much negativity down here with COVID. And before I posted it, I did something smart. I let 2 or 3 mates read it. And they came back wrong, bad, terrible. What are you trying to say there? So, I wrote it again, gave it back again. I was almost patting myself on the back. I must have written that very first chapter. It turned out to be 5 times before I published it on my Facebook page, and got really good reviews. But I got around to thinking, it's probably the way my brain still worked as an athlete, is that imagine not investing that much time and seeking that much improvement in what we do. It's why we practice every day, so that after 5 or 6 attempts to improve, we play a game and then we try to get better again. And I use that with students all the time. I said, everybody finish a school assignment. Or if even in the workforce, you'll finish a task and you'll submit it and say, that's the best version of me. Nobody cares to go back and seek evaluation and ways to improve and submit a better version of them. So I'm not good at giving short answers because, like you say, I love the storytelling attached to sport. But, that was a really big one for me, to always try to find a way to do things better. And I was really, really proud of the book when it came out for that reason. But the absolute reason for the book was, I recognize how fortunate I've been to learn from some incredible people and to be surrounded by some incredible people who so many people never be fortunate enough to be around. And I wanted to share what I've learned from them and hopefully deliver it in a way that can be applied to whatever you do in life. It's not a self-help book or anything like that. People tried to say that. I just had fun writing it and sharing stories about some great people.
You talk about pathways, which is tremendous, because it is that everyone has their own unique journey and everything's going to be different. I always think about it because I have a 10-year-old daughter and she loves basketball, but her pathway is going to be a lot different. I was a late bloomer. Like, I didn't really come into my own until I was like playing pro. It's like she has her pathway and so my one question was, your daughter Izzy is a tremendous basketball player. And I was going to be like, how the fuck did you do that? Because that's like what I'm trying to figure out with my daughter.
It was, I coached her for a while and I didn't want to. And for me, because I achieved some success here in Australia, Izzy was never absolutely dedicated to going to college, but she needed to get away from me. She needed to not be my daughter. She needed to be her own person. And I think that's really important. Mm-hmm. I was trying not to coach her for a long time before I stopped coaching her, but the depth of quality of basketball coaches, especially on the women's side of the game here in Australia, wasn't fantastic. And she asked me to do it. And until there was a genuine option to do better, and all I tried to do was instill habits. It wasn't as much the skill as it was the habit. And we argued a lot. We butted head a lot. And probably the most honest thing I said to her, she said, you're harder on me than everyone else. I said, yeah, because I care for you the most and I can see where you can go. But even in seeing where she can go with basketball, her choice to go to college, we were very, very clear that the number one priority was life experience. The number 2 priority was education. The number 3 priority was basketball. Never in the other order. And whatever she does with basketball, if she comes home after 4 years of playing college basketball, never touches the ball again, I couldn't be happier for her. She's had this incredible life experience. And if she does choose to play basketball, I think we're all pretty realistic that there aren't very many female basketball players who are going to earn generational wealth in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We hope moving forward, yes, but what sport can do is provide a platform to showcase the other things you do in your life to a broader audience. And I think that's where the sport can be special for her because she's really talented. She's talented as an artist. She's a great human being, and basketball can showcase that to more people than, inverted commas, an ordinary person who walks into a role and doesn't have that network to show off their ability to.
You do a lot of stuff now with tours, and you put together tours, which you're in Vegas and putting together groups that travel and kind of listen to the stories that you tell. How is that? How did you get into that? And I'm going to take notes so I can, copy.
COVID again. Honestly, we were drinking beer over COVID, and everybody wanted to travel. And one of the things I'd never done is ask a favor of people in my network. So I thought, what? I'm going to ask a couple of people to take a chance. And so I called Leon Rose, who I was Leon's very first NBA client, and he's now the president of the New York Knicks. So I called him and said, look, if I bring a group, is there any way you can look after it? No problem. I called Burke and I called the Mavericks, and that was what I based the tour on. I thought we were going to go anyway, and I thought, why don't we share this experience with basketball fans here in Australia? We'll have an incredible time. If we're lucky, we can call it work. But we think we can create experiences for people that they'll never, ever forget. I think we did that in our first year. We had an incredible time, on top of the behind-the-scenes stuff on Madison Square Garden. The group met Josh Giddey, they met Allen Houston, they met Dirk Nowitzki, they met Leon Rose, they met people along the way, and some of them had never been to an NBA game before, some had never been to an NHL game before, but just putting yourself in the room sometimes, and the chats we had like this, again, over a couple of beers, and we just shared stories, and the groups we took away stay connected. There's still the group chats, and the old saying that if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. It doesn't seem like work, and it's been a lot of fun. And hearing some of the stories after the tour that were incredibly memorable that we didn't even know happened, but we're glad we put those people in a position to be able to experience them, that's special.
So, funny story, Sam Rose, Leon's son, around the same time that I was playing, and I would come home in the summer, and my trainer, we would all work in a gym, and then kind of just to help out, I would work with some of the high school athletes, and Sam was someone that I worked with. Sam was a really good point guard. Yep. He was a cerebral assassin, just like not the quickest, not the best shooter, but he just knew where to go, knew how to get the ball. So Sam was great. That Rose.
I've still got photos of Sam sitting on my knee when I got to Cherry Hill, New Jersey for the first time, and I've still got memories of Leon being that exact same point guard at the local YMCA. It's incredible, but no, I caught up with Sam on the tour, and it was this really nice full circle dinner where maybe we're going to have dinner, and I took him to the place, Smith and Walensky's. Yeah. That was the first place Leon took me in New York, and it was a really nice thing to go almost full circle to go and take Sam there.
Yeah.
However many years later, it was a lot of fun.
So you, Australian, Basketball Hall of Fame, like you've been inducted into a Hall of Fame. Tremendous honor. Was that something? I mean, obviously, we never think about that when we're playing, but was that one of those moments that it's just really refreshing when you kind of get that call that, like, hey, you are deemed to be one of the best players ever to play in this country.
I hope that it means that I contributed, but whether I was or wasn't, I was always proud of it. The thing I was proudest of in my career is I think I figured out how good I could become as a player. I think I reached my full potential. But the nicest thing about that night was having my three kids there with me. And I think I hope that it was special for them because my two eldest were really young when I was playing, and my youngest wasn't around. So I hope. And you mentioned Izzy before. One of the nicest things of that night was just watching Izzy walk around the room and have conversations with Lauren Jackson and other legends of the game and feel like she belonged. And, I think I was happiest for my kids, I think. It was just a really nice night.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you hopping on. This has been really fun. It's been fun in terms of we played against each other, saw each other a little bit about outside of it, but really it's nice to kind of talk to you and have these stories shared, because playing against you was one of those things. Do I have it's behind? I have a picture of us playing against each other, because it was a really special moment, my time in Australia, and you were a legend, and I appreciate it.
Before I go, I do need to say something. I appreciate the compliment, but and I know you didn't ask me to do this, but you were talking before we started. We were talking off air, and I only just found out what Overseas Famous is about. And one story, the absolute two best opportunities I've had since I finished playing basketball were through sponsors and people I met through basketball, and what you're doing to connect athletes to a broader network of people at home. It's just so critical. So I'd be shouting it from the rafters of what you do. It's a really tough thing for athletes to retire, and it's especially for athletes who, as your name suggests, travel the world and people know who they are in Russia, Spain, Barcelona, Australia. But when they get back home, it's just the guy who played basketball that disappeared for 10 years. So, the more businesses that understand the employable qualities of professional athletes, the work ethic, the time management, the ability to take direction and go and execute, all those things, we try bits and pieces to do it here in Australia. So what you're doing is incredible, and shout it from the rafters. I love it. And if there's ever anything that I can do to help, let me know, because the corporate people who get involved in that, I don't think they truly understand how much they're helping basketball players transition into a life that's got just as good as experiences after we've played than what we had when we played. So congratulations, mate. It's great to see what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Chris. Chris Anstey, Tall Tales, go pick it up. It's on Amazon. Chris, it's been great catching up, and we will talk to you soon.
Love to. Thanks, Kev.
Thanks, everyone. This has been Overseas Famous. We'll see you guys next week.